This is the Transportation TV News Update. I'm Tony Dorsey reporting. It's Infrastructure Week 2017, and the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials and the American Association of Port Authorities are at the Rayburn House office building holding a panel briefing on freight, covering issues from multimodal freight infrastructure to dredging projects, with an emphasis on funding. The event, held in conjunction with the Congressional Ports Caucus co-chairs, Representative Ted Poe, Republican from Texas, and Representative Alan Lowenthal, Democrat from California.
We want to promote America's ports, and that's why we have the Ports Caucus. Appreciate all of y'all being here.
We need a multimodal understanding of this, and we need to understand where do we need redundancy in the nation, where are there problems.
Molly Campbell, the Port of Commerce Director at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, is moderating this panel briefing titled By Road, Rail, and Sea, Building a 21st Century Multi-modal Freight Network. Her opening statement focused on the implementation of the freight-related provisions under the Fixing America's Surface Transportation, or FAST Act. Campbell turning to the AASHTO AAPA State of Freight 2 report released in November 2016.
The report noted a couple of things. 57% of the states have already identified a total of 6,202 freight projects. $259 billion in project costs were identified by just 35% of the states. These numbers are only going to increase as states provide their state plans by December of this year.
Signed into law by President Barack Obama in 2015, the FAST Act was the first long-term surface transportation legislation to authorize funds for freight mobility, providing $2 billion annually through 2020. Panelist Roger Nober, Executive Vice President for Legal Affairs at BNSF Railway, says investing in freight-related infrastructure is critical, and he's hopeful that the Trump administration will do just that.
We like that they're focused on infrastructure and trying to help relieve burdens on private companies like ourselves and trying to, end additional regulatory burdens. And I know that they want to streamline project delivery. We'll see how that goes. And while we do like what they're talking about for infrastructure, as I said before, we are mindful of how they're planning to pay for it.
Panelist David Manning, president of the Nashville-based TCW Trucking Company and the first vice chairman of the American Trucking Associations, says the new administration will need a combination of funding and financing options to generate the kind of revenue needed to modernize U.S. ports and improve the rail and highway connections that link those ports to the national freight network. Manning says, like it or not, a price will be paid either way.
There's a huge cost in congestion, accidents, and then vehicle maintenance repair. The points that I was making was that just for a personal vehicle, only on maintenance, pothole type damages, it's about $523 a year in cost, where a 10 cent per gallon increase in the gas tax would only be about $50 to $75 a year in cost.
Manning says investing to build a modern national freight network will lead to the elimination of freight choke points and traffic congestion that he says robs the trucking industry of about $63 billion a year in lost time and fuel, or $19,000 per truck driver annually. A 10 cent a gallon increase in federal motor fuel taxes, he says, would only cost drivers about $1,500 a year. That's why the ATA supports increasing the federal gas tax.
Some 24 states that have decided to do a gas and diesel tax increase. So there are voters that are supportive of that. Hopefully our U.S. Congress will look at that and realize that it's not conservative to keep borrowing from the general fund to build up the trust fund.
While individual states have approved tax and fee increases to support transportation programs, AASHTO has developed a matrix of nearly 40 funding and finance options Congress can consider to pay for federal highway and transit programs. Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development Secretary Shawn Wilson says his state legislature will soon decide the fate of a proposed 17 cent a gallon statewide gas tax increase. And like his state, Wilson says the federal government should consider the idea.
I do think we should address our gas tax at the national level. I also think we should look at some of the policies around how we hamstring those revenues that we get. Even on the freight plan that we're talking about today in terms of how we do it, the freight plan is coming with all kinds of limitations to invest in surface transportation, and that's a good thing on the preservation side. By the same token, some states have real needs on the freight side that's core. If it's water works or dams or all kinds of infrastructure at the port, on the waterfronts, on the marine highways, we've got to figure out a way to allow states to do what is the most important thing for them and generate additional dollars in those communities and in the overall economy. And that's what it's going to take, a real locally driven effort with national priorities and goals in mind.
This has been a Transportation TV News Update, Infrastructure Week 2017.